This story happened back in 2021 when I was only 12. My aunt and my cousins were staying with us at the time because they had just moved to our state for a fresh start. My mom and dad were both in Florida, and my brother was at my other aunt's house 2 hours away. So it was just me, my twin sister, my aunt, and my cousins at the house. One day, my sister and I were playing outside by our house. The side of our house has a big yard, big enough that, if you wanted to, you could build a small house there. There's also a large tree at the end of the yard, near where the street ends. Due to the placement of my house, you can see 4 different streets from there. If you look to the right, you can see a long street with the police station, fire station, and courthouse. If you look to the left, you can see a closed-down corner store and another stop sign. So, as I said, one day my sister and I were playing outside when a car came speeding down the street in front of our house. As soon as the driver spotted us, the car slowed down. It was an old, beat-up family van. The way it slowed down right in front of us was already suspicious, but we just brushed it off. Then, when we saw the van drive by a second time, we decided to move a little closer to the house and continued playing. When the same car drove by a third time, it stopped at the stop sign, which gave the driver a clear view of our house. This time, we decided to go get our aunt. Once we explained what was happening, she came outside with us. Now, my aunt is very short, the same height as me and my sister at the time. It was clear the guy was watching us from his car because my aunt started waving him down, trying to get his attention, and he responded even before she put her hand down. She started cursing him out, asking why he kept driving by and staring at us. He mumbled some lame excuse, then quickly drove off. After that, my aunt went back inside, but my sister and I didn't want to go in yet, so we just stayed on the porch. Not even 2 minutes later, he drove by again. My sister and I ran inside to tell our aunt, and we all drove to the police station. They said he hadn't really done anything to us, so they couldn't take any action. However, we were able to get his license plate number and gave it to them. A week later, a girl went missing. Some people think she ran away, but I can't help but feel that it might have something to do with that creepy man. I want to share my ghost experience from 2 years ago. Let me introduce myself briefly. My name is Diana, and my girlfriend's name is Tabitha. This is a true story about an experience we had together. One day, I decided to take Tabitha to a motel near Dodger Stadium in Los Angeles. We enjoyed chatting, ate snacks, and watched TV. When it was time to sleep, I turned off the light. We were lying down, slowly drifting off. Suddenly, I felt someone touch my right foot. I woke up, freaking out since I knew Tabitha hadn't moved at all. I grabbed my iPhone and turned on the flashlight, aiming it toward the nearest TV desk. I was searching for whatever had touched my foot. I looked under the bed, nothing. I checked the bathroom, no one was there. That's when I realized it must have been a ghost that touched my foot. The thought made my face go pale. I decided to leave the light on for the rest of the night. I told Tabitha, "It's obviously a ghost." She replied, "I accidentally touched your foot." I said, "I know you're trying to calm me down, but you didn't move at all while I was awake. I felt nothing until someone touched my foot." Then I asked her to lie down and try using her foot or hand to touch my right foot. She realized I was right because she couldn't even reach my foot while lying down. Tabitha got very quiet. She hid her face, looking scared, and started breathing heavily. I told her, "Let's just try to sleep." A few hours later, Tabitha woke up from a bad dream, visibly scared. She stared at the lamp and didn't stop looking at it. She described her dream to me. A Latino man looked grumpy and angry. He was standing near the lamp, watching me sleep. He stood to the left side of the bed while I lay there, terrified. He was a Latino man with a thick mustache, brown skin, and old-fashioned clothes. He suddenly ran toward me, leaned over me on my left side, and stared angrily into my face. I was so scared that I covered myself with the sheet. I woke up immediately and couldn't stop thinking about him. Tabitha's story woke me up. Her face was full of panic. I told her, "Hold my hand and let's try to sleep." Half asleep, we held hands and closed our eyes. Later, I woke up from a bad dream. My heart was racing. I looked over at Tabitha, who was sleeping peacefully. In my dream, I saw the same man, angry and making plans to kill Tabitha. He was wearing a red flannel long-sleeve shirt. I woke Tabitha up and asked, "In your dream, what was the Latino man wearing?" She replied, "An old, red, long-sleeve flannel shirt." I was beyond shocked. I told her, "We need to get out of this motel room now." We quickly packed, got into my car, and drove away. It was my school break, and my mother suggested I stay with my grandma for a week or more during the holidays. I couldn't resist, since my grandmother cooked the best meals ever. So, I packed my bag, grabbed all my necessities, and my mother drove me to her apartment. We sat down at the table and chatted while we ate lunch. After a while, my mother said goodbye and left. It was just my grandma and me in the house now, and we had a blast. We watched reality TV shows together and shared a lovely dinner. Midway through the evening, my grandma asked me to grab the mattress from the closet and bring it to her room so I could sleep on the floor. I refused and told her, "I'm a big girl now. I can sleep on the pull-out couch in the office." She agreed and said, "That's fine. Just set up the bed yourself." So I did. It was time to go to bed when my grandmother came to my room and said, "It's time for bed now. Put down your screen so you can get a good night's sleep." I laughed and said, "I will. Just let me finish this last part of my show on my tablet." She said, "Okay, that's fine," gave me a hug, and shut the door behind her. After she left, I continued to watch my show. About 30 minutes later, I dozed off. When I woke up, I looked around the room and saw that my tablet was still playing the show at a low volume. I turned it off and glanced at the door, noticing it was a couple of inches open. I remembered that my grandmother had definitely shut the door, but I didn't think much of it, as she used to check on me after I went to sleep, just to make sure I was okay from time to time. So I shut my eyes and tried to relax. After a few minutes, I felt a strange urge to open my eyes, as if something was in the room with me. I looked at the door and saw a dark figure standing outside, visible through the small crack. I instantly froze. At first, I thought it might be my grandmother, but when I glanced at the clock, I saw it was 3:25 a.m. Then I realized it couldn't be her. Who checks on their grandchild at this hour? I was terrified, but I shut my eyes again and tried to convince myself it was just a shadow, that the figure would go away soon. After a minute, I opened my eyes again, only to see that the door was now wide open. My heart began to race, and I broke out into a cold sweat. The fear coursed through me as I felt certain the figure had to be in my room by now. I glanced at the mirror next to my bed and saw a figure crawling on all fours beneath my bed, moving like some kind of otherworldly creature. I was having an intense panic attack, unsure of what to do. Just as I was debating whether to run, the figure came up the side of my bed. I squeezed my eyes shut, on the verge of tears, when I felt a hot breath against my neck and heard a deep, terrifying voice whisper, "It will be done soon." In that time, I bolted out of bed and ran to my grandmother's room. I jumped under the covers next to her, panting and quietly crying. For the next 3 hours, I kept my eyes wide open, constantly looking around the room. I didn't dare take the covers off, even though I was sweating like crazy. I told myself I wouldn't sleep until it was light outside. Looking back on it, it still terrifies me to this day, but when I tell people, they don't believe me, and it hurts not to be believed. I know what happened, and sometimes I wonder what I would have seen if I looked behind me before I ran out of the room.
This is a story that happened at my uncle's house. Among his neighbors was an old woman, about 85 or 90 years old. She had a disease which was curable, but she was poor and didn't have money for the treatment. So, she chose black magic to cure her disease. Every day, some people would see her going out of her house at night around 1 to 2 a.m. and coming back around 3 to 4 a.m. One day, my uncle asked her out of curiosity where she went every night. She told him, "I go to the burial site. I have a guru there. I go to him every night for some rituals. But from now on, If you ever see me at night coming back from there, do not call me or scream my name, because when I come back, I'm not alone. They also come with me." What she meant is that when she would come back from the burial site, some spirits came with her, too. Now, this is the story of the lady. As I mentioned, she had a guru or something at the burial site. He was the one who taught her black magic. He told her that to cure her disease, she had to kill 3 people: 1 teenage boy, 1 newborn baby, and a newly married woman. So, what happened was, a teenage boy named Ramesh died of viral fever. It was very sudden. Just after his death, a newborn baby died too, from fever. Like, everything was happening very suddenly. And after the 2 deaths, one day, that lady visited my uncle's house. She came to my aunt and was trying to talk to her. She was touching her back, her hair and all, and was asking her, "Are you noticing the smell of cooking rice?" My aunt said yes, even though she was not cooking rice. It was like the old lady had hypnotized her. She used to come and ask for random stuff. After that, many incidents started happening with my aunt. First, one day my aunt was in the kitchen, and she was sure that she had turned off the stove. But when my grandmother went into the kitchen, she saw that the stove was still on. An explosion could have happened if she hadn't seen that. Second, she used to see figures and shadows that others couldn't see. The scariest part about it was that she used to see Ramesh's spirit everywhere. Whenever she was alone, she would see Ramesh's spirit. Third, she used to hear crying at night every day. One night, she even saw that Ramesh was standing on a terrace of someone's house, looking at her and crying loudly. After all these incidents, my aunt became suicidal. She was frustrated. So, one day, my grandfather called a priest. The moment the priest stepped into our house, he sensed negative energy. He told them that she had become a victim of black magic. The things she used to see were not actually there. They were just illusions that someone was making her see. Someone had done black magic on her, making her see things that was ultimately trying to kill her. That's why she thought that she turned off the stove when it was actually still on. The priest gave a holy charm to my aunt and told her to wear it all the time. Since then, she has been okay and doesn't see those things anymore. On August 25, 2004, in a village in Gapyeong City, South Korea, a man working on road maintenance discovered the body of a woman. The woman was wearing a light blue one-piece dress and no underwear. He immediately called the police, and the autopsy revealed that her cause of death was asphyxiation. The victim was identified as 23-year-old Park Yoon-mi, who had dreamed of becoming a schoolteacher. CCTV footage showed her getting off a bus around 8:30 p.m. that day, but her whereabouts afterward remain unconfirmed. She was scheduled to visit the Office of Education that day, but never arrived. About 3 hours after she got off the bus, her credit card was used at a gas station approximately 20 minutes away from where her body was found. According to the gas station attendant, the person in the car had rolled the window down only slightly to hand over the card. However, the employee could not recall the exact type of car, only that the fuel tank was positioned slightly higher than usual. Since the gas station had no CCTV at the time, further details about the vehicle could not be determined. The investigation confirmed that Park Yoon-mi got into a van after getting off the bus. However, why she entered an unfamiliar van remains unknown, and the identity of the driver has not been established. Some speculated that she may have been hitchhiking, but her friend stated that she was very introverted and unlikely to do so. A profiler speculated that at some point during the ride, she might have sensed something was wrong and asked to get out of the van. Since her body showed no signs of physical violence, it was theorized that the perpetrator likely verbally threatened her, instilling fear and preventing her from calling for help. This led investigators to believe the perpetrator was highly experienced in subduing women and had likely committed similar crimes before. The police later identified Kang Ho-soon, a notorious serial killer in South Korea, as a possible suspect in the case. Kang murdered 8 women over a 2-year period starting in 2006. His strategy involved driving his victims in his car for long periods before killing them. It was also discovered that Kang had served in the military near the area where Park Yoon-mi's murder occurred, and his wife's family lived nearby. Kang is currently in prison. When arrested, he confessed to luring women into his car under the pretense of offering them rides, intending to sexually assault them. He admitted to tying his victims' wrists with stockings, strangling them, and abandoning their bodies in remote areas. In some of the cases, he even burned the cars he used to erase evidence of his crimes. A profiler noted striking similarities between Park Yoon-mi's case and Kang Ho-soon's other murders, including the victim's phone being dead and the cause of death being asphyxiation. A man who spent time in prison with Kang Ho-soon shared this chilling observation. Whenever he had time, Kang Ho-soon would draw on A4 paper, and he would always draw women's faces, pinning them to the wall like some kind of exhibit. I once asked him, "Who are you drawing like that?" He replied, "I just draw them from magazines." But to me, the drawings didn't look like celebrities. They looked like ordinary people. And among the drawings, there was one of a woman wearing glasses. According to the police, one of the 8 women that Kang Ho-soon murdered was a woman who wore glasses. And people wondered if the face of the woman wearing glasses that he drew might be Park Yoon-mi's. However, this connection remains unresolved, and the mystery surrounding her case lingers to this day.
I've been your most devoted fan for as long as I can remember. Today I'm excited to share a special story with you. Have you ever had something unexpected happen that changed your life in ways you couldn't have imagined? My name is Hadra, and a few years ago, I experienced something that left me forever scarred. It happened on August 13th, 2021 at 2:45 a.m. It was a scorching summer night. The only lights in the room were the glow of my laptop and the moonlight streaming through the window. My sister and I were pulling an all-nighter, while our younger sister was dead asleep on the bed. Our room had a queen mattress and a bunk bed. My sister was sleeping on the bottom bunk, while my twin sister and I were lying on the queen mattress, eating Cheetos and watching a movie. Suddenly, my stomach dropped, and I got this awful, sinking feeling. I felt nauseous, like something was out of place. Naturally, I turned to my twin and said, "Hey, I'm getting this weird feeling, like something is wrong." She stared at me, dumbfounded, before replying, "It's almost 3 a.m. Go to bed. You're probably just paranoid." But I couldn't shake the feeling. "You know what? I'm going to check," I said. There was a moment of silence between us. The only sounds were the soft hum of the fan and our little sister's gentle snores. Then my twin sister burst into laughter. Passive-aggressively, I hit back, saying, "If I die, my blood is on your hands." I slowly tiptoed down the stairs, careful not to turn on any lights so I wouldn't wake my parents. My anxiety was rising and adrenaline was coursing through my veins as I began checking the living room. Everything seemed fine, so I made my way to the kitchen. I felt like the main character in a horror movie, convinced there was a secret camera recording my every move. Still, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Then, I got this sudden, unshakable urge to check the backyard. Arming myself with a water gun, I decided that if I encounter an intruder, I'd act like it was a real gun, complete with sound effects. In my mind, this was the best idea ever. As I reached for the door handle, exhaustion began to set in. I told myself, "Hajra, it's 3 a.m. Maybe you're just being paranoid. Go back to sleep." I hesitated for a moment, thinking I should trust my instincts, but ultimately shrugged off the feeling and cautiously made my way back to my room. Once back, I wrote everything down in my diary, while my sister teased me mercilessly. The next day at lunch, my family and I were eating together when my mom said something that made my blood run cold. Shivers went down my spine. and the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. Our house has cameras at the front and back doors, and she told me that on the footage from the previous night, there was a man, probably in his 30s, who had walked up to the back door and tried to open it. I asked her what time it happened, and she said it was around 2:45 a.m., which is right when I had gone downstairs. To this day, I still wonder what would have happened if I had opened that door. How would things have ended? What I learned from this experience is to always trust your gut feeling and never, ever open the door at 3 a.m.
This happened a few years ago. My parents were out of town to attend a wedding, and I was home alone. I decided to invite a friend over. Her name is Maya, and she lived on a street behind mine. I called her and asked if she could come over to my house, and she agreed. I got up and started preparing snacks and tea for us. About 20 minutes later, I heard the doorbell ring. It rang over and over, as if the person was in a rush. As I reached the door, I asked, "Who is there?" It was Maya. When I opened the door, she rushed inside. She looked terrified. I could see she was shaking and out of breath. I took her inside and gave her a glass of water. Then I asked her what was wrong. She told me that while she was walking to my house, she said she saw a man staring at her and smiling. She felt uneasy, ignored him, and continued walking. After a few steps, she looked back to see if the man was still there, and he was following her. She rushed to my house, hoping to get away from the man. When she reached my front door and looked around, the man was gone. I comforted her, saying that she was safe now that she was inside my house. We had our tea, ate our snacks, and talked about school, movies, and other stuff. After a while, we got hungry and ordered a pizza. Then we watched Netflix. About half an hour later, my doorbell rang. I assumed it was the pizza delivery guy, so I went to the door and asked, "Who is there?" The voice on the other side responded, "Pizza delivery, ma'am." I was about to open the door, but my friend shouted from upstairs like a maniac. She rushed downstairs, screaming at me to not open the door. I froze. She grabbed my hand and pulled me upstairs into my room, locking the door behind us. I asked her what was going on, and she told me she had been looking out the window. It was the same man who had been following her earlier, standing at the door. I was shaken. I immediately called the police. While we waited, we heard someone banging on the door and screaming for us to open it. All we could do was sit and cry. A few moments later, we heard police sirens. When we went outside, the man had been caught. Later that day, the police informed us they had found the body of a pizza delivery man who had been stabbed to death. The man at the door had planned to murder us too. Till this day, I think about what could have happened if my friend hadn't seen the man outside. It's possible I wouldn't be alive to tell you this story.
This happened to me when I was about 10 years old. My family and I were on vacation, and we traveled to our destination by train. My relatives live in a different state, and we decided to take the train to go there since we were middle class and didn't want to spend a lot of money on plane tickets. Once we reached the station, we grabbed our stuff and got off the train. As we were walking down the platform, out of nowhere, this weird guy came up to us with a large smile on his face. He was one of those people who help you carry your luggage from the station to your cab and charge a fee. He stood in front of us and asked if we wanted help with our luggage. My dad politely told him no. My dad and my older sister were busy trying to book a cab to take us from the station to my relative's house. The man didn't give up. He kept standing there and watching us. I figured it was a tactic to keep standing there to make you uncomfortable so you'll just accept his help and pay him. But something was very weird about this guy. He didn't seem like he was just hoping to convince us. He kept staring at me, and all of a sudden, he started touching my hair with his muddy hand, the whole time with that wide smile. At first, I just smiled and hid behind my mom. Often, people would warmly touch my hair because I was considered a very attractive boy for a 10-year-old. At least that's what my family thought. I assumed he did it to make us agree to take his help, but boy oh boy was I wrong. After touching me once, he immediately touched my hair again, and my mother calmly told him to back off. He didn't move an inch and just stood there. My dad and sister didn't notice what was happening because they were still busy on the phone booking the cab. My mom and I moved closer to them, but the creepy guy, still smiling, came closer again and started touching my hair and petting me. This time, my dad saw what was happening and how uncomfortable I was and screamed at him to cut it out. The weird guy looked skinny, and my dad could have easily taken him down, but my dad isn't the kind of person to even harm a mosquito. Even after my dad screamed at him with rage, the guy only moved back a few steps, still smiling, and then again started petting me. I tried to push his hand away, but I wasn't very strong, and his grip was firm. I couldn't believe that someone so skinny could have such a strong grip. My dad saw me struggling against him and decided we needed to get away from the man, so he pushed him, and we all started speed walking toward the station exit. I looked back to check if the creepy guy was following us, and to my relief, he stayed where he was, but he was smiling even bigger than before, even after being pushed and falling down. The station was very busy, but nobody even seemed to notice him. That part scared the heck out of me in particular, but my entire family was creeped out by the experience. Now I'm 18, and I barely remember this incident actually happening. Since my parents have told me about it a few times, I remember it more as a story, but even though I don't fully, I think this experience has made me feel subconsciously nervous about speaking to strangers, especially people who do physical labor and certain shopkeepers. But I'm working on myself to overcome this. We should have reported him to the police, but my family felt that we were saved by God's grace. They didn't want to have any further contact with him or even see his creepy face again. I still don't know what his intentions were with me, but I'm grateful that my family is so protective and always has my back. I was in the 7th grade when this incident took place. I was playing with my friends during PE when, all of a sudden, our coach told us to run to the locker room because it was a code red, which meant a real lockdown. My classmates and I ran to the locker room, and I'd like to mention that around the middle of 7th grade, my leg was sprained, so I couldn't run properly. When we were running to the locker room, it was pretty difficult for me. When we were all in the locker room, some of us were curious if it was a real lockdown or not. I personally thought it was a prank, since it was April 1st that day. Some of my classmates were acting like idiots, talking about how they were going to beat up the shooters. After what felt like half an hour, the school said through the intercom that the code red was now a code yellow, which meant that students and teachers had to stay in their rooms and not leave. For some reason, our coach thought that since the school was under a code yellow, it was all right to take all of us back outside. I was appalled that our coach was actually okay with taking us outside while technically still under lockdown. I don't know what my coach was thinking, possibly putting all of us 7th graders in danger. When there's a code yellow, it means there's activity happening outside the school, so it's still not right to go outside. Looking back, I realized that our 7th grade coach was pretty lazy. He didn't talk to us much and seemed more like a simple replacement teacher than anything. Anyways, all of my classmates followed my coach outside, but I had a bad feeling inside, so I decided to stay in the locker room. My friend questioned why I would stay, but I didn't really listen, so I just stayed behind all by myself. I felt a little nervous being alone in the locker room, but thankfully I had my phone to keep me company. After an hour, my class returned, and nobody noticed that I stayed inside. After heading to my next class, I found out everything that happened during the lockdown. It turned out that somebody got stabbed and possibly killed in the Wawa gas station right next to our school. During the code yellow, while everyone went back outside, the perpetrator went to the school and almost jumped the fence. When everyone saw him, they all took off running inside the building, but thankfully, he didn't make it inside the school. I couldn't believe that this was happening, especially because it was April Fool's Day. This was 2 years ago, and now I'm a freshman in high school, but I sometimes wonder what would have happened if I followed my class outside. If the perpetrator had managed to jump the fence, he could have easily caught me first, since my leg was hurting at the time. I only have myself to thank for being smart and staying inside the locker room where it was safe. 18-year-old woman who lives in the UK. My neighborhood is fairly safe, but there are some break-ins here and there. Also, I am a Muslim, which is important to the story. This story takes place as I'm writing this on the 8th of November, 2023. It was around 5 p.m., so it was dark. I was watching Ladybug and Cat Noir. My family were all at work, so I had no choice but to stay home. Anyway, we have a light outside of our house, which turns on whenever someone is at the door, so you will know. I was sitting on the sofa, waiting for my family to get back, but then the light turned on. Carefully, I got up and looked outside, but none of my family's cars were there. I saw the light was on, so I looked through the window, but there was nothing. I started to freak out at this point, so I put my scarf on and sat back down again. Then the light turned on. I peeked again, and my heart dropped. There someone was, jumping over the neighbor's fence. I tapped on the window by accident, and he faced towards me. His face was pale white, and he had a white shirt with blood dripping from his nose. His eyes locked onto mine. His eyes were dark brown, but they turned bloodshot red as soon as he saw me. I couldn't look away as I was in so much fear. I sprinted upstairs so fast and tried to text my parents. All of my siblings were at work, so I was worried they wouldn't text back. Then I heard huge footsteps coming up the driveway. A laugh so cunning. It was him. After there were no sounds, I stood in the hallway upstairs, which is right near the bathroom. I stood near the toilet door and sneezed. Then, as I was about to say something, I heard, "Bless you," in a dark, demonic voice. My heart was beating faster and faster. At this point, I was terrified. I locked and closed all the windows and doors and crept down the stairs. Suddenly, there was a light knock at the door. Then, as I watched from the stairs, he screamed through the flap, "Murderer!" As a hijabi, I'm used to people commenting on my appearance or pointing, so I wasn't surprised. He whispered, "Take it off." His bloody lips were all over the door flap. I recited my prayers louder and louder. Then I heard a car door slam. My dad and brother were home. I was so relieved. The man removed his eyes from the flap and ran. I'm still in shock. After what happened, I told my family, and they promised never to leave me home alone again. The man was apparently a criminal. He would spy on houses for days and then rob them. Please stay safe. It's a cruel world out there. But I always wondered what would have happened if I had taken my scarf off as a hijabi, or if I had opened the door. It's the summer of 2022. My girlfriend and I were planning a camping trip to the woods somewhere in Canada. We were advised not to go there, but being the young, stupid adults we were, we didn't listen. A choice I will always regret to this day. I was setting up our tent, shirtless. If you're wondering why, I'm a pretty well-built man. Not like a bodybuilder, but I have muscles and a six-pack. I guess that's something. So, as I was setting up the tent, my girlfriend came over with the rest of the parts to finish it, since it was a very difficult tent to put up. It took us 3 hours to finish, and we arrived at the campsite around 5 p.m. So by the time we were done, it was getting late. Being a phone-obsessed adult, I was scrolling on TikTok until my girlfriend decided to put her phone down and ask me to go for a swim. Now at this point, I was hesitating a bit because it was getting dark and we weren't experienced with being in the water at night. While I was deep in my thoughts, my girlfriend had already changed into her swimsuit. I noticed her and decided I didn't want to ruin the mood, so I changed into mine too. We were walking hand in hand to the shore when we heard a sound nearby. "What was that?" I thought, but the sound didn't continue, so we kept walking. I felt a cold gust of wind against my skin as we continued towards the water. Near the river, my girlfriend had already laid a towel down on the ground. Without wasting any time, she jumped in, and I followed. Laughing and splashing water, we were both having the time of our lives. I swam under the water and surfaced underneath her, lifting her body up, causing her to giggle, and we made out in the water. Then she looked at me and signaled me to stop by tapping my chest. What I saw still creeps me out to this day. I saw a tall man standing at the shore, looking at us. He was also dancing in a weird way, but what creeped me out the most was when I looked back at my girlfriend and then back again. The man was now swimming towards us. Being the young and athletic adults we were, we swam to the other side of the river. Thank God we took swimming lessons that summer. As we reached the shore, we realized we had left our phones on the towel. But screw it. I figured it's better if we can at least survive and worry about getting help later. We ran and ran, scratching ourselves against branches, getting wounded, but it didn't matter. When I looked behind me, the tall man was running after us. The way he was running creeped me out so much that I thought I was in a horror anime. He was running while looking at the sky, and his arms were moving like a rag doll. This is the moment when I realized miracles exist. As he wasn't looking, he collided with a branch, right at his head height. He was about 6'5" or so. The hit knocked him out cold, as we heard the thud when he hit the ground, and no signs of him getting back up. I didn't have time to look at his face because we were running so fast, and we eventually reached the end of the woods and found ourselves an empty street. We started walking along the road, and luckily, we eventually saw a car approaching. I hugged my girlfriend tightly as we embraced the moment of possibly getting to safety, and the car stopped next to us. The driver asked us what had happened. We explained everything, and she told us to get in. She brought us to the hospital, where my girlfriend and I were treated for the cuts and scrapes we got while running. We were then asked by the police what had happened. We told them everything, and they said they would look for the person. To this day, they have not been found.